There's something unsettling about schools at night. When the laughter fades, and the hallways fall silent, the air begins to hum with echoes of the past memories that never quite left. In this video, you'll hear 3 true school ghost stories, told in the voices of those who experienced them. So turn down the lights and listen closely. Because sometimes, when you think you're alone at school, you aren't. Our first story takes us to a forgotten building on the edge of town where a night janitor at East Ridge School learns that some students never really leave. This is The Haunting at East Ridge School. Story 1, The Haunting at East Ridge School. You never forget the smell of old books and chalk dust. Even now, years later, I can still close my eyes and feel it, that faint scent of age and silence that filled the hallways of East Ridge School, the small, forgotten institution where I spent my first year as a night janitor. It wasn't an exciting job, but it was quiet, and at the time, that was all I wanted. I had just moved to the town of Grayson Hollow, a quiet community tucked between endless pine forests and fog-draped hills. The kind of place where time seemed to stretch and fold in on itself. East Ridge School sat on the edge of that town, half swallowed by trees, its brick walls darkened by decades of rain and ivy. The school had once been a bustling place, I was told, but by the time I started working there, only the lower floors were still in use. The upper level and the old west wing had been closed off long ago after what they called an accident. No one said much about it, just that a fire had broken out in one of the classrooms back in the 1970s, claiming the life of a young girl. I remember the first night I worked there. It was late September. The air was cool, the halls empty. The sound of my mop dragging across the linoleum echoed faintly in the distance. I had my earbuds in, listening to soft music, trying to keep myself awake. Around midnight, I noticed that one of the lights in the second-floor hallway kept flickering dim, rhythmic, like breathing. Every time I passed it, the air seemed to grow a little colder. It didn't bother me at first. Old wiring, I thought. The place was nearly 100 years old. But then the small things started to happen. The first signs. The first strange thing I remember clearly happened about a week into the job. I had just finished cleaning the science lab and was locking up when I heard what sounded like a chair scraping across the floor, faint but deliberate, coming from the classroom down the hall. I froze, listening. There shouldn't have been anyone there. The building was empty after 8 p.m. The teachers had gone home, the doors locked behind them. I slowly walked down the hallway, the sound of my shoes echoing softly against the tile. The classroom door was closed, but I could see the faint glow of a light beneath it. I didn't remember leaving any lights on. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room was dark, no light, no movement. Every desk was neatly in place, except for one near the back that was turned slightly sideways, as if someone had just gotten up in a hurry. The window next to it was open, letting in a cold breath of night air that made the curtains sway. I remember whispering to myself, probably the wind. But as I reached out to close the window, I noticed something on the glass, a faint handprint. Small, like that of a child. It was on the outside of the window. That didn't make sense. The second floor was at least 20 feet above the ground. That was the first time I felt something watching me. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but I felt it. A quiet awareness, just beyond sight, waiting. The locked door. 2 weeks later, I had grown used to the loneliness of the night shift. The creaks of the building no longer startled me. The way my footsteps echoed down the halls was oddly comforting. But there was one area I still avoided when I could: the old West Wing. It was sealed off after the fire. The main door at the end of the second-floor hallway was chained shut, and a faded sign hung there, "Do not enter, unsafe area." Still, I often heard sounds from beyond it. Soft tapping. The distant roll of something heavy, like a desk being moved. And sometimes, faintly, the echo of footsteps that didn't belong to me. One night, I decided to check it out. It was about 2 a.m., and the rain was hammering against the windows. My flashlight beam danced across the walls as I walked toward the chained door. I told myself I just wanted to make sure the noises weren't caused by raccoons or stray animals. But deep down, I think I already knew that wasn't it. The closer I got, the colder it became. My breath started to fog in front of me. Then I saw it: the chain around the door latch was unhooked, dangling loose. That chain had always been locked. I was sure of it. A slow unease crept up my spine as I pushed the door open. Beyond it, the hallway stretched out into shadow, darker, dustier, older than the rest of the school. The paint was peeling off the walls, and the smell of smoke still clung faintly to the air, like an old memory refusing to fade. I stepped inside. The beam of my flashlight swept across the floor: scattered papers, overturned desks, a broken clock frozen at 12:14. Halfway down the hall, a classroom door stood slightly open. I should have turned around. But something pulled me forward: curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. I nudged the door open. Inside, the classroom was nearly untouched by time. Charred patches marked the floor, and in the corner, a small wooden desk sat apart from the others, as if it had been placed there intentionally. On its surface, carved deep into the wood, were 2 words. "Help me." My light flickered. And that's when I heard it: a faint sound, like someone breathing. It was coming from the far end of the room. I turned my flashlight that way, and for a moment, I saw her. A small figure standing near the back wall. Long hair, dark dress, head slightly tilted as if listening. Her outline shimmered faintly in the beam there, then gone. I stood frozen, my heart beat loud in my ears. When I blinked, the room was empty again. The whispering girl. After that night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever haunted that wing had followed me. I'd hear faint humming when I cleaned the stairwell, a soft, sad tune that seemed to echo from nowhere. Sometimes, I'd see a shadow slip past the end of the hallway, small and quick, like a child running late for class. And then came the whispering. It started one night when I was mopping near the library. The halls were silent, but I began to hear a voice, faint, distant, like someone calling softly from another room. "Hello." I stopped, looking up. It came again, a little closer. "Can you see me?" The voice was that of a young girl, barely above a whisper, trembling on the edge of tears. I slowly turned toward the sound. Down the hall, the light flickered again. The same one from my first night there. "Where are you?" I said quietly, barely breathing the words. But the answer came from behind me. Right here. The whisper brushed against my ear, cold as winter air. I spun around, nothing there. Only the long hallway stretching empty before me. That was the moment I truly believed. This wasn't just an old building making noises. Something was still here. The teacher's journal. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me again. I asked the school's daytime custodian, Mr. Halpern, about the West Wing. He was in his 60s and had worked there since before the fire. He didn't like talking about it. Finally, after a long pause, he said quietly, her name was Lillian May Harper. 13 years old. The fire started in her classroom. They said she stayed behind to help another student escape. By the time they found her, it was too late. He hesitated before adding, they say her spirit never left that place. Every few years, someone claims they've seen her or heard her. That's why they sealed it off. He told me that one of her teachers, Miss Collins, had kept a journal about the tragedy. When the school renovated decades ago, the journal was stored in the basement archives. That night, after everyone had left, I went looking for it. The basement of East Ridge School was a maze of old boxes and forgotten equipment. My flashlight cut through the dust as I searched shelf after shelf. Finally, I found it, a small leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age. Inside were entries written in neat, fading handwriting. Most of it was mundane class notes, attendance lists, lesson plans. But near the end, the tone changed. October 12, 1973. Lillian's been quiet lately. Says she hears someone calling her name in the hallways when no one's around. I told her it was just her imagination, but she looked so frightened. October 19, 1973. She won't sit near the window anymore. Says there's a shadow that watches her from outside. October 22, 1973. The fire alarm went off during lunch today. False alarm, or so they said. October 23, 1973. The fire started in room 214. I can't stop hearing her scream. The last few pages were scorched and unreadable. My hands trembled as I closed the book. That same night, I heard humming again, the same melody I'd heard before. Only this time, it was coming from the second floor. From the West Wing. The final night. I should have quit. But I couldn't. Something about her story wouldn't let go of me. I needed to understand. Maybe part of me wanted to help her, to give her peace. That final night, the air outside was heavy with fog. The kind that muffles every sound and makes the world feel smaller. I went back to the West Wing one last time. The chain was back on the door. I had made sure of it the night before, but now it was broken, hanging loose again. I stepped inside, whispering, "Lillian." The temperature dropped instantly. My breath came out in clouds. The hallway lights flickered once, then went dark. Only my flashlight remained, its beam trembling as I walked. From the end of the corridor came a soft sobbing sound. I followed it to room 214. The same room from the teacher's journal. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of smoke. My light caught the faint outline of a figure sitting at one of the desks. A small girl. Long hair. Head bowed. Lillian, I whispered. She lifted her head slowly. Her face was pale, eyes wide and glassy, and in that moment, she looked both impossibly young and impossibly old. Her lips moved soundlessly for a moment before a voice not from her mouth, but from everywhere around me whispered, "Help me." The room suddenly filled with light, a flash of orange and red. The sound of fire roared in my ears. I could feel heat pressing against my skin, though there was nothing burning. I stumbled backward, shielding my face. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. Only silence. Only darkness. The desk where she had sat was empty. But carved into the surface, deeper than before, were the same two words, "Help me." I left East Ridge that night and never went back. Epilogue. A few weeks later, the school finally decided to demolish the West Wing entirely. The structure had become too unstable. During the demolition, they found something strange: a small silver locket buried beneath the floorboards of room 214. Inside was a faded photo of a young girl. Her name, engraved on the back, was Lillian M. Harper. They say when the locket was removed, the workers felt an odd rush of warm air like a sigh of relief. After that, the strange noises stopped. The lights no longer flickered. The West Wing was gone, and with it, maybe, she finally found peace. Still, sometimes, when I pass by the empty lot where East Ridge once stood, I think I can hear that faint humming again. Soft. Gentle. A melody lost to time. And I wonder if she's still there, somewhere between memory and air, listening. Because some places never forget. And some souls never leave. Our next story unfolds inside Hollow Pines High, where a security guard on the night shift discovers that room 313 holds more than dust and old desks. This is The Ghost in Room 313. Story 2, The Ghost in Room 313. I used to think schools were safest at night. Empty hallways, locked classrooms, the faint hum of old lights, it felt peaceful, almost sacred. I never imagined those same quiet corridors could hold something else. Something that waited. It began when I took a night security job at Hollow Pines High School, a small town school built in the early 1950s. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and my job was simple: walk the halls every hour, check the doors, make sure no one had broken in. The building itself was old but well kept, a long, two-story structure surrounded by dense pine trees. During the day, it was filled with noise and life. But at night, the silence pressed down like a heavy blanket. I've worked other security jobs before, but something about Hollow Pines always felt different. The air seemed thicker somehow. The echoes didn't behave the way they should. And the deeper into the building you walked, the colder it became, even in summer. I first noticed it during my third week on the job, when I started checking the third floor, a section that hadn't been used for years. The third floor. The principal told me the top floor had been closed after a student's accident decades ago. No one went up there anymore. The stairwell door was always locked. But the first time I reached that door on my rounds, I noticed something strange. There was light shining from underneath it. Just a faint strip of pale, flickering light, like a candle or a failing bulb. I tried the handle. It was locked, just as it should be. Still, I crouched down and peered through the narrow gap. Nothing but darkness beyond. When I straightened up again, I swore I heard footsteps on the other side. Slow. Measured. One step. Then another. Then silence. I told myself it was probably pipes or settling wood. Old buildings make noises, especially at night. I moved on, trying to shake the unease creeping into my chest. But I couldn't forget that light. The note. A few nights later, I was doing my usual patrol when I found something odd. It was sitting on the security desk in the main office, a folded piece of paper, neatly placed in the center of the table. No one should have been there after hours. I unfolded it carefully. Inside, written in faint pencil, were 4 words. "Don't go upstairs tonight." My first thought was that one of the teachers was playing a joke. But the handwriting looked old-fashioned slanted cursive, like something from decades ago. When I checked the security cameras, they showed nothing. The office had been empty for hours. I left the note where it was and went about my rounds, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, the 3rd floor light was back again. This time, brighter. Room 313. By the end of the week, my curiosity had won. Around 2:30 a.m., I went back to that locked stairwell. I told myself I was just going to look, maybe take a few photos for the maintenance team. The school had old wiring, and maybe there really was a light left on somewhere up there. The key ring on my belt had a master key. I hesitated before sliding it into the lock, my hand shaking slightly. The door opened with a soft click, and a gust of cold air drifted down the stairs, smelling faintly of dust and something metallic. I turned on my flashlight and climbed. Each step creaked under my boots. The air grew colder the higher I went, until my breath came out in visible wisps. At the top, the hallway stretched out into darkness. The ceiling tiles were sagging, and the floor was coated with a thin layer of dust. Old lockers lined the walls, most of them rusted shut. My flashlight caught the numbers on the classroom doors as I passed: 307, 309, 311. Then I reached room 313. The door was slightly open. A faint, flickering glow spilled through the crack, the same light I'd seen under the stairwell door. I stepped closer, my hand brushing against the cold metal doorknob. Inside, the room was still. The desks were covered in dust, and the chalkboard at the front bore the faint remains of an old equation, half erased. The source of the light came from an ancient ceiling fixture buzzing faintly, glowing dim orange. I took a cautious step inside. And then I saw the writing on the chalkboard. It wasn't math. It was a sentence, written in large, uneven letters. "I'm still here." For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe one of the teachers had written it years ago as a joke. But the chalk marks were fresh. When I touched them, white dust smeared across my fingertips. I turned to leave, but something stopped me. The air had changed. I could feel it. The temperature dropped, and the light above me began to flicker. Behind me, a chair scraped slowly across the floor. I froze, heart pounding. Another chair moved. Then another. The sound echoed softly, one desk at a time, like invisible hands dragging them into a circle. I shone my flashlight toward the sound, and for a brief, breathless second, I saw her. A young girl, sitting at one of the desks. Head bowed, long dark hair falling over her face. She lifted her chin slowly, eyes catching the light, pale, hollow, and endless. Then everything went black. The past. When I came to, I was lying on the floor near the door. My flashlight was still clutched in my hand, its beam flickering weakly. The classroom was empty again. I stumbled downstairs, shaking, and didn't go back up there for the rest of my shift. The next morning, I told the principal what had happened. He looked at me for a long time before sighing. "You saw her, didn't you?" he said quietly. When I asked what he meant, he told me the story. Back in 1974, a student named Emily Parker had fallen from the third-floor balcony during a chemistry demonstration gone wrong. The fire that followed destroyed most of the floor, and Emily never made it out. Her desk, room 313, front row, was where they found her belongings, her notebook, her glasses, and a single unfinished sentence written on the board. "I'm still here." They closed off the third floor after that. I didn't know what to say. Everything I'd seen, the writing, the girl, the light, it all matched what he described. The principal must have seen the look on my face because he added, "You're not the first one. Every few years, someone on night shift says the same thing. They always see her around the anniversary of the fire." When I checked the date on my watch, my blood ran cold. It was October 21st. The same night Emily had died. The recordings. For the next few nights, I couldn't sleep. The sound of that chair scraping, the pale face in the dark, it haunted me every time I closed my eyes. Still, part of me needed proof. I needed to know I hadn't just lost my mind. So the following week, I brought a small voice recorder to work. I left it running near the stairwell to the third floor, tucked behind a fire extinguisher. When I played it back later, most of the audio was just static and faint hums. But halfway through, I heard something else. A voice. A girl's voice. Soft, trembling, barely audible but clear enough to make my heart stop. "Is anyone there?" Then, after a long silence, "Please don't forget me." The second visit. I should have stopped there. I should have deleted the recording and quit. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. The following Friday, I went back up those stairs. This time, I brought a small camera. I wanted to capture whatever was up there, just once, to prove to myself it was real. When I reached room 313, the door was closed. I pushed it open, camera trembling in my hands. The room looked the same, dark, dusty, abandoned. But on the chalkboard, the writing had changed. "Don't be afraid." My camera flickered and shut off instantly. I felt the air shift again, that heavy, pressing cold. Then, faintly, I heard her voice. "Please help me." It was coming from the corner of the room. I turned, and for a split second, I saw movement, a shadow shifting near the window. The glass reflected the faint outline of a girl standing behind me. When I spun around, she was gone. Only the faint smell of smoke lingered in the air. That was the last time I went to the third floor. Epilogue. A month later, I quit the job. I couldn't handle the dreams anymore, waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps or faint whispering in my room. Before I left, the principal thanked me and said quietly, "Some people think she's still waiting for someone to notice her, to remember her name." He told me they planned to renovate the school the following year to finally seal off the old third floor permanently. But a few weeks after I left, I got a call from one of my co-workers. He sounded shaken. During the renovation, they found something hidden behind the chalkboard in room 313. A small silver necklace, a locket, its chain scorched black from heat. Inside was a photo of a girl, Emily Parker. The back of the locket was engraved with 3 words: "I'm still here." Our final story takes place deep beneath Ravenswood Academy, where a teacher finds the past reaching up through the floor itself. This is the basement classroom of Ravenswood Academy. Story 3: The basement classroom of Ravenswood Academy. When I took the teaching job at Ravenswood Academy, I thought I'd finally found peace. After years of moving from one small school to another, this one seemed different, quiet, tucked deep in the countryside, surrounded by tall oaks and empty fields. The air was crisp, the halls lined with old portraits and the faint smell of polished wood. But from my very first day, I could sense that Ravenswood carried secrets. You could feel it in the way sound moved through the hallways, how footsteps seemed to echo twice, once in the present and once from somewhere long gone. I was assigned to teach English to the senior students, and my classroom was on the basement level, a part of the school that always felt colder than the rest. The walls were thick, the air heavy, and the lights took a few seconds to buzz to life when you flipped the switch. It was room B12, a narrow, dim classroom with no windows. I didn't know then that the room itself had a history, or that the past was still alive down there, waiting to be noticed. The whisper beneath the floor. The first time I heard it, I thought it was my imagination. I was staying late after school, grading papers while the rest of the building had gone quiet. The hum of the old heating vents filled the air, steady and dull. Then faintly I heard it. A whisper. It came from somewhere near the back of the room, low and soft, like a child's voice carried through the pipes. At first, it was just one word. "Miss." I looked up. The room was empty. I listened closely, but there was only silence. After a moment, I went back to grading, though my hands were trembling slightly. A few minutes later, the whisper came again. "Miss, help." I stood up so quickly that my chair fell backward. The sound had come from under the floor. I knelt down, pressing my ear to the cold tile. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the heating system. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was down there, calling out. The closed room. The next morning, I asked the school custodian, Mr. Rowland, if there was any access below room B12. He paused, frowning. "There's an old storage space under that section. Used to be a classroom back in the 50s before the flood." "The flood?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Back in 1954. A pipe burst during a storm. Basement flooded fast. They didn't get everyone out in time." I felt my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" He hesitated before answering. A student named Clara Avery didn't make it. They said she stayed behind to grab her drawing book. By the time they found her, he stopped, looking away. Anyway, they sealed that old room. No one's been down there since. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The whisper, the voice help. I told myself it was just coincidence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The drawing book. A week later, I found something strange. I was rearranging books in the supply closet at the back of room B12 when I noticed a loose panel behind one of the shelves. It came off easily, revealing a narrow gap filled with dust and cobwebs. Inside was a small, leather-bound sketchbook. Its pages were warped with age, but the name written inside was still clear. Clara Avery, 1954. My hands shook as I turned the pages. They were filled with pencil drawings, portraits of classmates, flowers, the old school building. But the last page was different. It showed the basement classroom, drawn in haunting detail: desks, chalkboard, and a figure standing near the door. The figure was blurred, surrounded by dark, smudged shadows. Beneath it, in faint handwriting, she had written, "It's coming through the floor." That night, I couldn't sleep. The lights go out. The next evening, the power went out during my after-hours class prep. The emergency lights kicked in, bathing the basement halls in pale red. I gathered my things to leave, but as I reached for the doorknob, I heard it again. "Miss." I froze. The voice was clearer this time, desperate, trembling. I turned slowly toward the back of the classroom. There, just beneath the last row of desks, the floor tiles were wet as though water had seeped through from below. I knelt down. My fingers brushed against something icy cold. And then, from beneath the floor, came a muffled knock. Once. Twice. 3 times. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, my flashlight beam shaking across the walls. That's when I saw her. A girl standing by the door, her hair dripping wet, her uniform darkened with water. Her face was pale, lips blue, eyes wide with fear. She raised her hand slowly, pointing toward the sketchbook on my desk. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, she whispered, "Give it back." The lights flickered once and she was gone. The hidden stairwell. The next morning, I went to Mr. Rowland again. I told him about the flooding, the noises, and the sketchbook. He listened silently, then said, "You found Clara's book, didn't you?" I nodded. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "There's a hidden stairwell behind the boiler room that leads to the old basement. It's sealed, but maybe it shouldn't be." That evening, I found it a narrow door half covered by pipes, the wood swollen from age. I pushed until it gave way with a long groan. A staircase led downward, steep and cold, into darkness. The air smelled of earth and something damp and old. I took my flashlight and Clara's sketchbook, my breath shallow as I descended. At the bottom, I found the old classroom. The walls were cracked, the floor warped from years of water damage. Desks sat at strange angles, half buried in dried mud. And there, at the center of the room, was a small wooden chair, the kind used in schools decades ago. On it rested a rusted metal bracelet, engraved faintly with the initials, CA. I knelt beside it, whispering, "Clara, I found you." The air grew still. And then, faintly, I heard a breath close, too close. "Thank you." A warm wind brushed my face, carrying the faint scent of lavender and river water. When I looked again, the bracelet was gone. The aftermath. The next morning, I handed the sketchbook to the principal, explaining everything I'd found. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable. Later that day, the school held a small ceremony in the courtyard. They placed a plaque in Clara Avery's memory, something that had never been done before. After that, the whispers stopped. The basement grew warmer. And for the first time since I'd arrived, room B12 felt peaceful. I stayed at Ravenswood for another year, and nothing strange ever happened again. But sometimes, when I worked late, I'd still hear faint humming through the vents, a tune that sounded like a child's lullaby. I like to believe it was Clara, finally at rest. And yet, whenever I walk past that old boiler room door, I still glance at it for a moment too long. Because I know what's behind it. And I know the past never stays buried for long. Old schools are filled with memories, laughter, lessons, and sometimes, sorrow. And when night falls, those memories stir again, drifting through the empty halls, whispering their stories to anyone who will listen. So if you ever find yourself alone at school after dark, and you hear a voice calling softly from the shadows, don't answer. Because not every student at school is still among the living.